spellbound Nozawa enrolled at the University of Washington's dental school, studied hard, and faithfully graduated. Yet, years later, after the opening of a handful of dental clinics, when he could finally afford the lifestyle he had always wanted, a tree came crashing down and foiled all his best laid plans. The second was when Dr. Nozawa was caught in the middle of a couple's domestic violence incident one fateful night. His neighbor first shot his wife dead, then shot Nozawa in the head from 12 inches away before finally shooting himself. Two tragic events that would change his life forever. You may call it tragedy. The doctor said, misfortune is just disguised as an opportunity. I say Spirit has a plan for everyone from the beginning, and Dr. Nozawa's plan has just began. Missing both eyes now, Nozawa has to get used to moving about indoors and out. Shortly after the shooting and recovery, he realized that he desperately needed help learning to navigate, so he signed up for Washington State's Department of Services for the Blind, which took 10 months to be admitted to. In his words, the doctor says, dreams do really come true, but you have to believe it before you can see it. He said he has made his own dreams come true by helping others pursue their life aspirations in his free 14-page book, Precipice of Potential, which can be downloaded from his website at www.drrandallgeorge.com. Nozawa asks provocative questions to help readers examine their own lives more closely, like, what do you do that fills you with joy and excitement? When is the last time that you gave something, anything, freely without expecting or wanting anything in return? What did you do with your last $20? Certainly food for thought. Dr. Randall Nozawa agrees with me that we are all family, and our conscious selves are and have been since the beginning a place where love, yes, love is the most important thing in our lives. And I am is a term which means self-love is a human trait that makes us all whole with the universe. It's my honor to introduce to you, to the universe, your host tonight, Mr. Randall George Nozawa. Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, here it is. Boy, we're into June, and wow, where has this year gone? And I'm so excited, today because we have a very, very special guest and a new friend. And what's wonderful is that actually you both have a lot in common here, because we're going to talk about 9/11 today, and Bob, you were almost there on ground zero, and Captain Dan has got so much experience with this that I want him to, tell his story. But it's interesting, before we get started here, and I want him to, have a lot of minutes speaking, is that when we're kids, we're always taught to tell the truth. That's most important. Tell the truth. That's what you have to do. But what Captain Dan has found is that telling the truth comes with it consequences when you're an adult. And then because of that and his courage to tell the truth, it's devastated many portions of his life, but he hangs in there and keeps on telling the truth because why? It's the right thing to do. And I'm just honored to have him on the show, uh, and it's appropriate for the show name, Be the Change, because he is, and and why this show is on the Pyramid Worldwide Network that's now being broadcast to 132 countries, so a large audience. And this is Captain Dan Hanley, and Captain Dan, you have a large audience here, and
Good.
I don't want to keep them waiting here. So, uh,
You want me to fill in a little bit about the doctor? About Captain?
oh no, no, please, yeah,
First of all,
please do.
first of all, Captain, I said I was saying to someone just yesterday when I told everybody that you were going to be on the show that I was so jealous. I mean, you got 20,000 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, I had like 150. It was like, it's like somebody else saying, "Oh wow, I got a career of 500 shows, and I've got like 1,600 just about." So I mean, I know what the feeling is. I mean, it's like wow. But anyway, for the people that are out there, Captain Dan Hanley spent his entire working life flying airplanes. That's why oh God, 2,000, 20,000 flight. Oh wow. Anyway, as a civilian pilot, then as U.S. naval aviator, and finally as a United States or United Airlines pilot. When I read that too, by the way, about the airlines, and I was like, oh, okay. All totaled, over 35-year career span, he flew 15 different aircraft, accruing over 20,000 flight hours. But in December 2003, he was illegally, should I say, not legally, terminated as a United Airlines B-77 captain by the FAA and airline management for speaking out. That's what the doctor was just speaking about. We speak truth. And he was speaking truth. He was speaking out about issues concerning 9/11. He fought this wrongful termination for over 5 years. The government closed his case without interviewing a single witness nor reviewing any of his evidence. Does that sound like something that just happened right here in this country? Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah. So I've got to talk to this this wonderful human being, and we communicated. Well, I really long distance because he lives in some place called Islamabad, Pakistan. I go, well, I've heard about that, but I don't even know where that is.
It's the capital.
And
Yes.
but anyway, this guy's gone through so much, and he's been punished for telling the truth. But to me, that's why I wanted him on the show, because with his courage, and it's a lot of courage, he still keeps on telling the truth, and because it's the right thing, and then he won't back down. So you talk about a guy that is intent on bringing good to the world. He's it. So yeah, let's get this going here, and it is time to get it on.
Yeah.
But the stage is yours, Captain Dan.
Well,
Go ahead.
thank you both for that nice introduction and for having me on the program. I really appreciate it. Yeah, people think because I am controversial and I do speak out that I'm hiding over here in Islamabad, and nothing could be further from the truth. 11 years ago, I met, fell in love with, and married a Pakistani, and have lived here happily ever since. So let me dispel that rumor right off the bat. But yes, I did fly airplanes for 35 years, and it was my childhood desire to be an airline captain, and I never gave up on that dream and followed it through 35 years until my career ended tragically. And you said that it cost me dearly. Well, yeah, it did, because it cost me a 27-year marriage, happy marriage, the alienation of my two adult kids who blame me for the divorce, still believe the official 9/11 story, think I'm a whacked out conspiracy nut, and don't speak with me. And it destroyed my reputation as a pilot and my 35-year sterling career. and I lost over $4 million in pay, pension, and stock. So that sounds like a unique, unusual or unique story, but it isn't. It's so common amongst whistleblowers in the United States to go through terrible beating for standing up and speaking out about the truth because they've got to suppress it any way they can. So if you'd like, I could get into what I'm doing right now in Islamabad as far as the organization that we formed.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, a group got together, and I dubbed myself the director and international public spokesperson for this global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers. And we've got a website at 911pilots.org and a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots. Now, the purpose of this organization is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked by a system employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computers and guide the aircraft to its target. Now, once this system's engaged, the pilots can no longer disconnect it. They're along for the ride. So, yes, we're saying that the aircraft were remotely controlled. Please don't turn off the program and allow me to continue and explain a bit about this remote system in a little bit here. But the goal of our organization is to recruit as many highly qualified and experienced pilots from around the world, whether they're active or retired, military or civilian, who would be willing to testify on camera via Skype as making the statement that not only could these hijackers not have flown the 9/11 flight profiles, but that they could not have flown them themselves. So on the website I just mentioned, on the home page, we mentioned the Pentagon profile, the flight profile allegedly flown by Hani Hanjour, who was a 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker that piloted supposedly American 77 into the Pentagon. Now, this airplane took off heading west, got to altitude, made a U-turn, and headed back in towards the Pentagon. And at 7,000 feet in the descent, he commenced a 330-degree descending, accelerating corkscrew turn to arrive precisely at ground level without skidding the surface to precisely hit the Office of Naval Intelligence at over 500 miles per hour. Now, this maneuver was replicated in a simulator by highly experienced pilots, and without exception, they crashed the simulator. They couldn't do it. And yet, we're asked to believe that this inexperienced pilot, and I'll get into his flight credentials shortly, accomplished this maneuver on the first attempt. So where are we going to go with the information that we have? Well, there's a little-known group. They should be on the mainstream news, but they would never reach that. But it's called the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and they've got a website. And what happened here is a group of lawyers in the United States got together with the biggest 9/11 whistleblowers in the world, and they compiled 57 evidence packages. Now, it consisted of information from architects, engineers, scientists, police and firemen, and other individuals. And they compiled these evidence packages and submitted it to the U.S. Attorney in New York, Jeffrey Berman, forcing him to announce that he was going to convene a grand jury investigation into their allegations that World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7, and yes, there was a third building that came down on 9/11, were brought down by controlled demolition and not by jet fuel fires or the aircraft impact damages. So where is that investigation right now? The Department of Justice and an organization called the National Institute of Standards and Technology are stonewalling them at every turn. They're trying to do everything to block this investigation from moving forward because it's a slam dunk case. It would conclusively prove that those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition and destroy the whole official narrative. So we are going. I'm in direct communication with the board of directors for the Lawyers Committee, and they've known for about a year and a half what we're doing out here. And they asked me to state on programs like this that they're not presently legally representing us or remaining neutral at present, given where we are. but at some point in time in the future, they'll entertain the idea of compiling evidence packages that includes our testimony and other evidence and submitting it to a U.S. attorney for a grand jury investigation. And then the other thing we've done is on behalf of the organization in August, I filed an FAA whistleblower report via their hotline online. And I got a receipt acknowledging that they had received this extensive material and information that I provided them. And initially, they were cooperative. They signed an FAA aeronautical engineer in Seattle to the case, and we exchanged emails and pleasantries on a phone conversation. But when they discovered the depth and breadth of the information we were presenting and what we were saying, they clammed up on us and stonewalled us up until about 8 days ago. They finally came out and assigned a point of contact, but they've stonewalled us. They've been deceitful in what little communications that we've had, and in one instance, I feel like they outright lied to us. But what we're doing is we're going to run the full gamut, both with the FAA and with the Lawyers Committee, to see where it takes us, because this is a real test. The Lawyers Committee's case and our case are a real test of the American justice system. And I believe we're the only legal acts on the planet out there trying to bring forth information regarding 9/11 in the legal and political arena. So why is our organization doing this 20 years later? Well, I call them the guilty subhuman mobsters that planned and executed 9/11 are still at large. We know that Osama bin Laden did not plan and execute 9/11. So we're not just doing this for the 2,977 innocent victims that died in the United States on 9/11, or the 6,000 that were injured, but also for the millions in the Middle East and South Asia who have been murdered, maimed, or displaced as the direct result of the invasions, illegal and unwarranted invasion, I might add, that occurred there based on the lies of 9/11. Now, 9/11 was the biggest crime ever committed on American soil in its history. And a lot of people don't realize there's never been a criminal investigation into this crime. The United States government said, well, we're not going to call it a federal crime. We're going to call it a terrorist act. And we're not going to follow the normal protocols for investigating a crime like this. So people say, wait a minute, there was the 9/11 Commission, but that wasn't a criminal investigation. That was hearings held that they collected information and put out a report afterwards. There would not even have been a 9/11 Commission. The government came out and said, we already know who did it. We found a passport in the rubble. We found a headband out in Pennsylvania countryside. We know who the hijackers are, and we know that bin Laden planned and executed this event. And everybody bought into this, or most people did, okay? And if it wasn't for the next of kin of the victims that died that day, that petitioned Bush to convene the 9/11 Commission, it would have never occurred. And it occurred 14 months later. Now the co-chairman, Tom Keene of the commission, stated at the time after the commission submitted its final report that it was time constrained, underfunded, and set up to fail. And the next of kin wanted a bunch of questions answered, and 70% of them went unanswered. So not one single pilot was permitted to testify before the 9/11 Commission either. So we want our day in court. We want justice to be served. And we feel that the reason why so many people fell for this official story that these hijackers flew those airplanes is because they're not pilots and they cannot conceive of the absurdity of the ludicrous notion that they did. So that's why we're pressing forward. If you like, I wish I could bring it up visually, but I would like to cover some of the information that we have on our website, because I love everybody that's listening to this to go to 911pilots.org and read the material there. It isn't a long read, but there's a lot of good videos on there that will back what I'm saying here. But on the website, when you call it up, at the top of the page, the home page pops up and basically says what I just told you just now. But at the top of the page, there's an About Dan Hanley page. And it goes into a brief discussion of who I am and where I'm coming from, sort of like the introduction you just gave me. But at the bottom of that page, if you scroll down, there's a couple of Malaysian TV interviews that I did, short TVs, that we talk about this uninterruptible autopilot system. But what I'd like people to read would be this lengthy affidavit that details my forced medical grounding for speaking out in 2003, because it shows the length that United Airlines, the FAA, and the union went to ground me. And it isn't unique what they did to me. It's very common in the airline industry, and as a matter of fact, other industries as well, where they force an individual to undergo a psychological evaluation, and they come up with a bogus, trumped up psychological diagnosis that will ground you forever as a pilot. Now, in my case, even though I exhibited no symptoms whatsoever of it, but it's the most prevalent used diagnosis, they diagnosed me bipolar and said I was grounded for life as a pilot. And as you mentioned, I fought this thing for 5 years. I took it to every level and branch, relevant level and branch of government over this 5-year period. And they closed my case without interviewing a single witness or reviewing any of the evidence I had to support my allegations that they had, in fact, violated RICO laws, which is racketeering influence corrupt organization. And really, if you knew the people that I contacted with, I made trips to Washington, D.C., beating on doors, congressmen, senators, every relevant committee chair in Congress, both the Senate and the House, I contacted to know of my own home state of Georgia, senator and congressman, to no avail. They said, we have no jurisdiction over matters such as these. So it cost me dearly, but I'm still out here speaking out. But getting on with the website, there's a Join Us tab at the top of the page. And I mention this because this is how Dr. Nozawa and I met. He actually joined us on the website. And there's a comment, all we need is your first name, last name, and email address. And there's a comments box down there. And it isn't just for pilots to join us, it's for the general public as well. And that will put you on our email list so that we can provide you with periodic updates of our progress with what we're doing. But also, if you're the host, if you're a pilot, we ask that you put in that comment section what kind of airplanes you flew, and we'll get in touch with you and try to arrange an interview of you. But if you're a host of a radio or TV program, just drop us a note there and we'll get in touch with you, because I do like going on programs like this and explain what it is we're doing and the information on the website. But getting on, there's a drop-down menu on the website. And there's a couple of items there, such as our motto, and we got a memorial to the flight attendants and pilots that died on 9/11. But we've got aircraft photos, is what the tab says. And if you go there, it does a photo comparison of a Cessna 172 aircraft with that of a Boeing 767 aircraft. And we just want to point out the stark differences, because the Cessna light single-engine airplane was the primary training aircraft for these hijackers. And you're talking about an aircraft that weighs less than a ton compared to one that weighs over 100 tons. And we say it's the equivalent of having you had your driver's license in a small car for about a year and a half and climb into a huge semi-tractor trailer you'd never driven before and try to maneuver it around at a high speed. That all by itself, you could stop there, makes the whole story absurd. But we move on to the next tab, which is cockpit differences. And,
hold on
yeah.
a second. Hold that thought. For some
Yeah.
reason we had a server drop out on us, and I'm going to have to make it part 2. So
Okay.
you guys just stay right there and get ready to. Doctor, is there someone there that can answer this call when I put it through again?
No, they left. She left.
There's no one in the house?
No.
Oh, boy. Well, then we can't do it on video, but you're going to have to do it on just voice, because the voice is picking it up. It dropped. It dropped out. For some reason, the server just went poof, and that never happens.
Wow.
Boy, I wonder if it's the topic or something like that. Who knows, right? But
yeah.
But no, well, Dan, we're gonna have you back numerous times, so
Hold on.
This is okay.
Don't anybody move. Don't anybody move. I'm gonna try something.
Okay.
The doctor knows me pretty well. I do some strange things.
No, you're pretty good at it. You're this one man do it all stuff. So hey, it can get done.
Well, it's like Dan. He does the same thing. Let's see. Yeah, I've never seen anything like this happen.
I don't know. Bob is kind of a strange on this particular day with this particular guest, so it makes me wonder.
Let's see. I hope you hold that thought. Okay, we're back on again. According to what I'm looking at, yes.
There you go.
I got the servers up. How? I don't know, but everybody listening out there, now remember, you're on Pyramid One World Radio, and you can call in if you have any questions whatsoever is being spoke about. Anything in this program, you can call 609-663-0153 from anywhere. Also, you can go to the chat room. If you're on Facebook and you saw the ads that have been on there for 3 or 4 days now, you will see there's an address there that you can actually talk to us while we're talking, just by taping. All right. Go ahead, Dan. Give it to it.
Okay, we were talking about the aircraft size differences. And the next item on our website is the cockpit differences. And again, we do a photo comparison of a Cessna cockpit with that of a Boeing 767 and ask, do you notice any subtle differences? Well, of course you do. The Cessna aircraft has, you're familiar with, Bob, single round dial instruments, the old-fashioned type instruments, where you go to the 767, it's got the CRT displays. It's got control display units that have 7 different pages on it that you type in information to a flight management computer, and a whole myriad of switches and knobs compared to the Cessna aircraft. And Bob, I'll ask you, with your experience in light aircraft, you think you could hop in a 767 and fly it?
If someone will, you know what? I tell you something, and I'm only because when you go over 100 hours and that you kind of sort of know how the wheels go up and down, etc. But when if you had someone guiding you,
yeah,
where it's a third party telling you what to do in the cockpit, if you've flown for say even over 50 hours, solo, I'm talking.
Yeah.
I'm not talking with a trainer, but solo. If you've done it over 50 hours, you should be able to control that plane. And if it's off the ground already, hey, that's easy. I could, just my feet and one hand. I mean, I could put the plane anywhere I want it. But when it comes to the instruments and everything, when you have to precision guide the plane, that's a whole nother program.
Especially at 500 knots.
Yeah,
especially
when you're
never having flown a jet aircraft before, so it's a different animal. And when you look at the size of the aircraft and the complexity of the instrumentation, our organization is saying no way. And I'm basing that. I mean, I can go back to the late '60s where I was flying light airplanes, and it doesn't seem that long ago to me. And I remember how inexperienced I was, and the prospect of me flying a bigger airplane. I mean, I was being offered a job as a co-pilot on a Beechcraft D-18 tail dragger, dual engine recip, flying airmail all night. And the thought of just being a co-pilot on it was overwhelming to me. And for me, to see these guys' lack of experience and to hop into these complex jet aircraft that they had never flown before. The story is ludicrous on its face. So,
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah,
there's a lot of them out there. Some of them, I've heard this story before. I can't tell you what airline, but I've heard it from someone that I know that worked there. And they said, some of these guys are really stupid. I'm like, oh
yeah,
my goodness. And he's going to fly somebody?
yeah, yeah. So, anyhow, we can talk about the next item, which is the qualifications or lack thereof of the and the flight profiles of the aircraft that hit buildings. Okay, and if you take American Flight 11, which was piloted by Hani Hanjour, who was supposed ringleader, 32-year-old from UAE. No, he wasn't from the UAE. I can't recall right off the top of my head. That's not important where he's from, but his approach was pretty much a straight-on approach. And people say, well, all he had to do was point the airplane and go. Well, yeah, you got to take into account your drift angle and your winds. And they say, well, they're big buildings. Well, they're not really. They weren't really that big a building. And again, this is an original analogy. I heard it on another program, but it would be comparable to getting in a semi-tractor trailer you never drove before, get it up to 500 knots and try to drive it through a Jiffy Lube without scraping the sides of the truck. That's how accurate he would have to be to hit the building precisely in the center the way he did. And people don't realize that the flight management computers and the navigation system on these aircraft are derived from cruise missile technology. It's extremely accurate. So in the case of a remote controlled aircraft where it took control of the flight management computer and uplinked the course, speed, and altitude into this computer, whatever's in that box, whatever in that control display unit feeding the flight management computer, that's where the airplane's going to go. So the other pilot.
Let me ask you a question, Dan.
Yeah.
There wasn't a planted beacon or something on the buildings?
I don't believe that to be the case, and there wouldn't have to be with this remote control system.
Yeah, but
Here's an example, Bob, on an auto landing. Yeah, you do have a localizer and glide slope, okay? But when the weather, people don't realize when the weather gets down to a certain visibility minimum of where they can only see 1,200 feet down the runway or less, pilots are required to auto land the airplane. Now, you latch up everything on the computers and tune in certain radios, and the airplane will fly right down the glide slope and localizer, touch down the touchdown zone, and track down the center line of the runway. And you have to actually disengage the autopilot to get the airplane clear of the runway because the system has control of it. But that's how accurate these systems are on these aircraft. So it wouldn't need a beacon to guide it into the building. But the other hijacker was a guy named Marvin El-Shehhi. He was a 29-year-old from the UAE. He flew United 175 into the South Tower, the second plane to hit the Twin Towers. And he approached the building from the south. And about 12 seconds out from the target, he racks it into a 30-degree angle of bank turn to precisely hit the building. And had he not used that exact angle of bank at that precise time, someone's computed geometrically that he would have missed the building by 800 feet. So we're saying that would be a difficult maneuver even for an experienced pilot that had time in the airplane to be able to perform at that closure rate. So the real smoking gun amongst the hijackers is the guy I mentioned before, Hani Hanjour, that supposedly flew the Pentagon profile. Okay, and on our hijackers page of the website, if you go down to the Hani Hanjour, he's the third hijacker listed there. We've got notes at the bottom that describe what a poor student he is. He came to the States in the mid-90s and took some flight training before going back to Saudi Arabia. And he came back a little over a year before 9/11 and went to re-enroll in the school that he had attended before, and they refused to take him because he was such a poor student that when he was there before, they didn't want to waste assets on him trying to teach him how to fly. But the thing that really stands out is 1 month prior to 9/11, he went to the Freeway Airport in Maryland with the intent of renting a Cessna 172, and they wouldn't rent it to him because he couldn't handle the airplane. And
Wow.
yet this guy was supposed to have flown the Pentagon flight profile. Now, if we get any call-ins, I'm going to get some people call in and say there were no airplanes, Dan. There were holograms, because there's people that argue that. As a matter of fact, Doctor, you mentioned your friend today that brought that up about there not being airplanes. There are people claim that there were no airplanes involved, that they use holograms and trick photography to simulate these airplanes flying into buildings. And we don't go there with our organization. We don't even debate it, because that isn't what we're saying. We're not saying what actually happened on 9/11. We're saying what could not have happened. That is that these hijackers didn't have the experience or knowledge to have flown the aircraft. So, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, 3 out of 4 airplanes hit the buildings, assuming that's what happened. How did they get there? And the only viable alternative explanation you can give is this uninterruptible autopilot, which I'll discuss right now, because I still believe there will be people listening saying you can't remotely control a large commercial jet aircraft. Well, yeah, if you go to the remote control page of the website, you'll note that as far back as 75 years ago, the U.S. military in Europe launched Operation Aphrodite. And what they did was gutted out old B-17 bombers to lighten the weight and loaded them with 30,000 pounds of a highly incendiary compound called Torpex. Now, pilots were required to make the takeoff, but once they got airborne, they'd bail out of the aircraft, and these aircraft would be remotely guided to targets in Europe. Now, this was 75 years ago. Now, imagine the technology back then. And this is the first example that I can find of a military drone aircraft. And we point out on the website that Joe Kennedy, JFK's older brother, was actually killed on one of these top secret missions when the airplane blew up before he had a chance to bail out. And we got a short 5-minute film there on the website that goes into detail on this. But if you jump ahead 40 years to 1984, the FAA and NASA conducted a joint crash test experiment in a remote location where they took a 4-engine commercial jet, a Boeing 720, loaded it with crash dummies and cameras, and they wanted to test crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. Now, they took this big airplane off by remote control, flew it around the pattern 4 times before they intentionally crash landed it. And we got a short film on there that shows the final crash landing of the aircraft. But that was in 1984. Now, if you jump ahead to the mid-90s, a system was developed. Excuse me. A system was developed called the Boeing Honeywell Uninterruptible Autopilot, and it does exactly what we said. And the stated purpose of this system was to prevent would-be hijackers from commandeering a commercial jet aircraft in flight by remotely taking control of it and flying it to one of 180 airports in the world and auto-landing it. So it was an anti-hijack system, okay? Well, we have proof that it was developed and produced in the mid-90s prior to 9/11. And this is one of the things we brought forth to the FAA. We're saying to them, the pilots couldn't have flown the airplane. We know this system existed. And they came back and said, well, it no longer exists on the airplane, which intimates, well, it did at one time then, right? And we come back because we've got on the website, it's a 45-minute interview of a friend of mine named Rob Balsamo, of an avionics technician named Wayne Anderson, who actually worked on this system in late 96, early 97, where they brought a Boeing 757 into the hangar to do a bench test on the autopilot. And there was a man in maintenance control with a laptop computer, told him to engage the autopilot, and he took complete control of that aircraft on the ground. And no matter what they tried to do to unpower the system, they couldn't do it. There's one way of engaging an autopilot. That's just by turning the switch off. And there's four ways of disengaging it. Turn the switch back off that you turn it on with. There's a small red button on the yoke or the steering wheel that you can press. That disengages the autopilot. If you apply a 70-pound force or more on the yoke, that'll disconnect. And finally, if you pull the circuit breaker on the system, that should disconnect the autopilot. Well, they pulled every circuit breaker on the airplane, and the system wouldn't disengage. It's backdoored, and it's got its own power source. So I can only imagine the horror of these pilots suddenly losing communication and the transponder being shut off and not having any control of the airplane or being able to talk to anybody about what was happening. So for the people that say there were no airplanes, well, yeah, well, then what happened to the 4 aircraft and the passengers on board that day? Because I was in Newark Airport. I managed to get over to the airport that day, and that's the airport that United 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania departed from. And I know for a fact that that plane was loaded with passengers and crew, pushed back from the gate and took off because I was there. And I asked these people that say there were no planes, I said, what happened to the crew and passengers? How did they wind up out in Pennsylvania in the field if there were no if there were no planes involved in 9/11? So I don't argue that anymore with these people because I've seen all the evidence that they've produced, and I know where they're coming from and why they're saying it. We just don't debate it because it's outside the focus of what our organization's all about. But finally on the website are these pilot interviews we conducted. And we've only got 6 of them on there right now. Why? Because we were loading them up on YouTube, and YouTube was pulling them down saying they were hate speech. So rather than get 3 strikes and have our YouTube channel closed, we've conducted other interviews. We've got the MP4s on them, but we haven't YouTubed them yet. And what we're doing with these pilot interviews is we're submitting them to the Lawyers Committee so they can vet these pilots, so they can take a deposition from each one of them to submit to a U.S. attorney. So that's essentially what's on our website. It's 911pilots.org. And the way you can help us out is, number 1, join us. Number 2, if you're a pilot, let us know and we'll get in touch with you. But also put out the word just about our website because it's got a wealth of information on it. And by saying that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, it blows the holy hell out of the whole official narrative that there were even Muslims flying the aircraft. So as a whistleblower, I'll mention this, and it's sort of off topic of my website and our organization, but several years ago, I was working with the Government Accountability Project and the National Whistleblower Center in Washington, D.C., which are the 2 largest whistleblower advocacy groups in the world. And they told me late in the ball game when I was working with them on my case that if you're a federal whistleblower in the United States, according to their statistics, you stand less than a 2% probability of winning your case. The whistleblower laws aren't worth the paper they're written on. You don't get a jury trial or a discovery phase. And it's how these mobsters get away with what they do because they know they can with impunity, with an only 2% probability that they're going to get caught. So my case is not unique in how I was punished as a whistleblower, but I can't encourage people enough to go out and speak out. Be careful how you do it and who you're telling what you're saying to. But I consider right now that the U.S. is a police state. As a matter of fact, the entire planet is. If you look at the United States with their illegal NSA wiretaps, Homeland Security, and the Patriot Act, people are afraid to speak out for fear the FBI will come kick their door down. So I don't blame everybody in the United States because not everyone has lost their spine, but they have to learn some way of transcending fear or the fear of death and stepping forward because there's so much corruption right now in government and in the civilian sector, from the street level all the way up to management. And somehow we have to expose it. And the only way the mainstream media isn't going to cover it for you because, well, we know about the mainstream media, but for myself over here in Pakistan, I took a look around and started thinking about it, and a whole new generation has been born since 9/11. I mean, if you look at today's college students, they were just like 1 to 4 years old at the time and have been fed for 20 years the lies that have been perpetuated by world governments and the mainstream media. So they believe the story, or they've been told the story, that Osama bin Laden, living in a cave 8,000 miles from the United States on dialysis, suffering from kidney failure, armed with a laptop and a cell phone, was able somehow to command 19 angry hijackers who hated the American way of life to commandeer 4 aircraft, evade the most sophisticated air defense system in the world for over an hour, and fly 3 of the 4 aircraft into buildings. I mean, the story all by itself to me is absurd, but this is what they've been fed, and this is what the governments and the mainstream media perpetuate. So what I'm tentatively planning on doing, and I don't know how receptive, I haven't tested the waters yet, but I want to go to colleges and universities in Pakistan. There's over 160 of them, and go on a speaking tour just to explain to these people what I know about 9/11, because I know too much, and I'm not boasting when I said I know too much to remain silent, and I won't remain silent. There's been a a media complicity in the cover-up, and we know who owns and controls the Western mainstream media. So,
Dan, from yourself, that so many things that we have at at our disposal right now to use as media, if anything touches companies like Google, Microsoft, any of the above type of companies, anything that comes out that's 100% truth or backed up by references of how they got the information, where they got the information, when they got the information, all those, the who, what, when, where, how, and why of a story is shot down in 2 seconds like you have no idea. That's why companies like, I don't know whether you watch them over there, but like Newsmax and OAN
right.
or any of those companies, those reporters or those people that are telling you things on air have the information. They got the raw information. They're only telling you, they're not making a story out of it. They're not making entertainment out of it. They're telling you what it is, what the story was, what the news was, what actually happened. And that's why they're so to the right of everything that's going on right now in the world that's left. I mean, it's
Yeah.
crazy when you watch them all. I mean, you have to have a logical mind, I guess, maybe to see it the way I do. But I see black and white so easily. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You just want to grab one of those people and smack them upside the head and say, "Hey, look, you're an actor. Get out of here."
Yes.
This is a tough place because Dan, I thank you for what you do because as a I'm you guys have all this knowledge and I'm kind of like a kind of third party looking in, but what I got out of all this is this very much mirrors what this COVID thing is. Just deception, lies, and when you look at it's propaganda, censorship, and fear mongering, and what this 9/11 has done in the political scale is that it's made the Western world, especially America, hate Muslims when this is totally off base. And because now it's like, oh, look at these, they're all terrorists, they're all out to kill Americans, and we need to kill them first and all that. So hate, law of attraction kind of stuff. So it falsely planted. And I just blame Bush Jr. and Cheney because they're the biggest criminals there are. And then you step forward to tell the truth and you get hammered, literally hammered. And also thank you for your courage to do this because unless there's people like you, then the lies and the hate will continue, and all of a sudden that becomes the like you said with the next generation, the narrative. Oh, look what happened back then. Those damn Muslims, they're going to kill everybody because they're all terrorists. I said, oh, good grief. And so no one looks into it anymore because the lies become truth.
Right.
The new normal. And you kind of look at where we are at now with this COVID scam here. It's the same thing. And so the people in power, the globalists, and the governments and things like that, that they're kind of teaming up and saying, what can we do to these people? And you just use the propaganda, use the fear, use the censorship, which is just way out of control. And like without people like you, Dan, we would never know. We would never know. And then, but you paid a price for that because boy, they whacked you, and they will continue to do that because you're doing the right thing, and because you're a man of integrity and consciousness, you will proceed forward because you can't turn your back. You can't say, oh, it just doesn't do anything to me anymore. But you care about people. You care about the truth. You care about your fellow pilots. Okay, and the American folks are so dumbed down, or they're given so much misinformation that they go, oh, this is what happened when it really wasn't. So, I thank you for your courage there, and then you paid a high price for that. Okay, and it's continuing on with this COVID scam here because it's the same thing. And
Right.
and Bob, you've experienced this too. You start telling the truth, all of a sudden you get censored, or you'll get your stuff
Oh,
pulled. You're good enough to get back online and all that, but you get your stuff pulled. And like you say, YouTube is very popular, it's very big, and whatever new algorithm they have going now, you start putting out the wrong words out there, then wham, you're taken down. And
Right.
past years of shows and all that gets all buried. But yeah, so anyway, I thank you for bringing all this up because this one incident, and with bad leadership, bad politics, and whatever greed is out there like that, or enslavement politics, is that the Western world and the United States now, they hate Muslims, and unjustly so. So I thank you for that, and
Right.
whatever you can do to keep on, and I think that's gonna create a new movement, and we can't change the existing system, but we can make a better one, I think. And
Right.
you're one of those leaders, okay? Because
Well,
one,
thank you.
you didn't shut up, you kept on going, say, hey, this is the right thing. I can't walk away from this. I just know too much. I have to tell the truth. So
but
Right.
yeah,
you
so,
know,
so
Doc,
so thank you for that.
Doc, I just want to jump in here for a second. There's so much. Let's put it this way: what Dan is doing, there are so many smoke and mirror things going on around subjects like that it's unbelievable. Today, the president of the United States was on the tube, and he's talking about a Tulsa race massacre
Yeah.
that happened. All right, 100 years ago, he was it was a commemoration of 100 years of this, and saying that all those people that are relatives of any of those people that had the massacres needs a reparation
Yeah.
for this kind of stuff. Now, this is something, of course, that's going to put the hair up on few million people in our country, but it's smoke and mirrors. This is to deter what is really going on to what you're listening to. So you automatically, your mind, your thoughts, and everything else, and that goes, well, I'm gonna think about this guy and this massacre thing. Let's put it this way: even in the Arab community, there are so many that hate Americans because they think we hate them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the media says we hate them. But look, I through my whole business, life and I was in Manhattan for 25 years. All of it, it was my best friends were from every Arab country you could think of, including Egypt. And we used to go and have Egypt, holidays and that with them at their houses and everything else. I never hated anybody like that. They never hated me. We were on the same level all the time. What Dan is saying is it wasn't the people that would be on the same level as each other or people that would hate each other but don't. It's people who are running the show. And that's what
Right.
what he means by that, because let's face it. I mean, like he flies. I've flown it a couple times. I know what it takes to turn a plane and everything else. And if Dan is right, and the guys flying those planes that day were as dumb as he said they were, I swear to God, I know what it takes to turn a. I mean, I know what it takes to turn a plane almost upside down
Yeah.
and get it straight and get it right side up too. But let me tell you something. If you don't know what you're doing, right, you'll be the first guy sitting in the first pond that comes by.
Right.
Those planes, you just can't play with them. They're big. Well, I think Dan will agree with me. They're like big babies. You
Right.
know, you got to tickle their bellies a little bit, and they fly real good. But God help you ever do anything funky. Oh, baby, they'll do everything wrong they possibly can, and
Yeah.
that's nature. That's the nature of the beast. And for those guys to just, I mean, I was in Kearney. I sent the thing and that over to the doc so the doc can know what I saw.
Yeah.
I was in Kearney, New Jersey, when the second building got hit by something. I didn't see what hit the building because at the angle I was at looking, I mean, we were so close to the Twin Towers, you could almost put your hand across the Hudson River and touch it. That's how
Yeah.
big they looked from my side. I was up on the hill on the top, the highest part of Kearney, New Jersey. And all we saw was the stuff coming through the other side of the building, the
Yeah.
blast that came through at the time. And then when everybody was crying and screaming and everything else, about, I guess it was about an hour later, maybe 45 minutes later or something like that, the buildings fell.
Mhm.
And everything was all kinds of crazy. I mean, I had a wife that was on the phone, and that I was supposed to be in a meeting. I told the doctor I was supposed to be in a meeting across the street from the two
Wow.
buildings that fell down. It was what's the name of that building? The Deutsche Bank. We were supposed to have a meeting in that bank. I was supposed to be there in the front of the building where the conference room was, across the street from the Twin Towers.
Wow.
So, duh. But for
Yeah.
some reason, that morning, early that morning, that the meeting was called off. So I was in my office in Kearney.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I saw the whole thing. And my wife at that time was a head nurse in a hospital in New Jersey. And she calls me up on the phone, that's screaming and freaking out on the phone. And she's going, oh, you okay? Okay. And I said, what do you mean, okay? I'm still in Kearney. And she was like freaking out because everybody that was a patient in the hospital was watching it on TV.
Mm.
And she knew where I
Wow.
was going. So, of course,
Yeah.
oof, that was her brain. But what you're saying about using an autopilot and everything else, it would logically it would make sense
Yeah.
because of the
Right.
stupidity of the people behind the wheel of the plane.
Right.
They were just sitting
Right.
there having a Coke, taking a ride.
Well, on the pilot interviews we've conducted, none of them have ever heard of the uninterruptible autopilot. I mean, it's on the internet. You can Google uninterruptible autopilot, and the first thing you get is a Wikipedia article that says Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot, and it describes the system. But it was my aha moment because when I heard back in 2002, 2003, the flight credentials of these pilots, it goes, no way. They had to have been trained on those aircraft in some other country. And when they didn't come forward and say that was the case, I refused to believe the official story. And that's what these pilots are coming forth saying on these interviews. There's no way. Haven't flown small airplanes and the big airplanes. There's no way these guys could have flown the airplane. So that's where you finally draw the conclusion. Well, then it had to be this uninterruptible autopilot system.
What I'm
And
saying is they couldn't fly a 180 if they wanted to.
well, they
No,
were trained in those kind of aircraft.
But I'm saying, it's like I don't think they could even do that, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, could you
Yeah.
imagine one of those guys trying to land one of those?
Well,
You're aiming
pardon?
you're aiming with even a small plane, a small aircraft at
Yeah.
what's the runway. If they could, I mean, if I just can't see the precision that they hit the building, and then the same guy that trained to land a small or to fly a small plane could even come close to landing a plane on a runway. They'd be in the grass,
Right. Right.
upside
So,
down.
yeah.
Not skill enough. Yeah.
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 So, just to close out here, I've written a book, and we're producing a documentary here in Pakistan. Actually, there's some people in the United States working with it as well, and it exposes a lot of things. Even goes into offering suggestions as to who may have been responsible for 9/11, if not bin Laden and his 19 hijackers. So that'll be coming out here in a few months. As far as the government, me living here in Pakistan, they know I'm here, they know what I'm saying, and I don't think they like it, but I don't care. A couple of years ago, the first time I knew I was on the radar, a couple of years ago, I hadn't been to the States in a couple of years, and my wife and I were planning a May trip, and in April, when I made reservations on Qatar Airways through Doha to Atlanta, the FBI called my ex-wife in Washington, wanted to know everything about my trip, and I went, what the heck? How'd they even know I was coming? So I called the FBI headquarters in Washington and said, hey, what's up? Why are you looking for me? And they wouldn't tell me anything. So I said to my wife, something's going to happen when we get to the States. And sure enough, when we got into the immigration hall, passport control, she went over the foreigners line. I'm in the domestic line. And about 2 minutes later, she's being escorted over by a man and a woman who identified themselves as an FBI agent, TSA agent, and asked me if I had time for questions. I go, sure. So they took us over to a desk that there was no line and told the immigration officer, here, stamp their passport. And when the guy got in the computer and looked me up, he looked at the FBI agent and said, hey, you know this guy's red, don't you? Well, I didn't ask him what red meant, but I didn't think it was anything good. And they took me in a room and just wanted to know where I was going to be, points of contact, phone numbers, etc. I thought that's all there is to it. So I thought it was all over, but a month later, we're leaving the States. And we had just cleared through security and dumped out into a busy concourse. When up walks behind us another FBI agent, TSA agent, who knew that I was going to be on a flight leaving at that time, what I looked like. It was kind of spooky, right? And they said, you have time for questions? Well, we got there early. I said, sure, I got plenty of time. So this time they took me in a room, and it lasted about a half hour, and they knew everything about me. They knew what I was saying on Facebook. They knew that I was in the military. They knew everything about me. So yeah, I tell people this because if you're on Facebook, most people already realize that the NSA and everybody and their brothers screening what you're saying on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. But I could care less. I'm going to say it anyhow. But I posted something on Facebook last year on the uninterruptible autopilot, and I tied it to Malaysia Air 370, the 777 that disappeared out over the Indian Ocean several years ago.
Yeah.
And Jacob Rothschild and a company called Blackstone and another one called the Carlyle Group.
Blackstone.
And within 2 minutes, I was pulled off Facebook for security reasons. And they wouldn't let me back on. It took me about a year. They finally let me sneak on, but I'm being shadow banned so bad right now on Facebook and Twitter. It's almost not worth the effort to even post anything on it because nobody's even looking at it because they're not letting them. So I still do it, but it's just a word of caution. Big Brother's watching you in this Orwellian police state we're living in here.
Doc, you got a couple seconds. Go ahead.
No, it's pretty intense. I'm so glad to have you on, and we're going to have you on again. And I know that a lot of the folks I've contacted recently, just telling them about you, you're going to be on more shows. And, all you can do is tell the truth. Because, just knowing you like this as a, new friend, I don't think you could tolerate yourself if you didn't. So, you've taken this stand and, just tell the truth, and whatever I can do to help, I'm there with you because one, I don't like bullies.
Yeah.
And, I care about our brethren, and I want them to know, and I want them to, stick up for their rights before they lose it all. So I thank you for being on the show.
Well, I thank you for having me, and thank you for being my friend and bringing me out so I can talk like I just did about topics that are important to me. Thank you both for having me on.
Of course.
It was an honor having you on.
Thank you.
Let me see. Let me talk about this because I know there are people listening that right now because I can see them. But the thing is, we should at one time or another in that. You should tell your friends, Dan, that want to talk like you did, to come on with you in another show, and I can put almost 20 people in this at
Well,
the same time. We
Doc,
can put together a very, very, very brilliant bunch of people all in the same place and that with the same story and the same, how would you say it, feelings about the
yeah.
honor of what they're saying.
Well, Dr. Nozawa listened to Michael Deacon's program where I was on with Doug Green, and
Yep.
the program lasted 3 hours because Doug is so vocal about so many things that I'm sure he would be in agreement. He's also an airline pilot who was terminated at UPS because he refused to go through a fitness evaluation like I did. So he's still fighting his case. He's still waiting for his day in court. But he's on exact. He's one of the pilots that I interviewed and we've got on film, and he did a very good. They're only 15 minutes long, and they're on the website. But he did a very good interview, and he'd be somebody I know who would love to come on with me, and that shares the exact same feelings I do about so many things.
Well, then you and the doc and I get together and figure out what you want to do, and then we'll put it together. We'll put it together.
Okay.
Let's do it.
It can be as big as you'd like, Dan.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Maybe I can get some of these other pilots to come on too.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there are so I'm sure there are so many people. Let's face it, you were in Newark. I mean, come on, that's not a small. That's not like Teterboro. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's a big, big, big airport. And there's plenty of pilots there that saw everything. They
right.
probably know as much as you do, and probably read 9/11. What's his pilot .org, and I'm sure that they're in agreement with you. So the thing is
Yeah.
that we got to start sniffing around and looking behind the curtains.
Yeah.
Well, I got a huge group of pilot names off LinkedIn and got their email addresses and started emailing them. And you'd be surprised how many are reluctant to come up and speak out, especially if they're active employees. They're afraid of getting fired. So they say I'm not interested. So it's been a challenge to interview these pilots for that very reason. Some of them say, "Well, it was 20 years ago. It's ancient history. I'm not going to get involved." Others say, "I can. I'm an active employee. I don't want to participate." So
Yeah, and you can what's this? We can have one of those that just like the people that are listening right now that probably do it all the time. And when somebody is on this Skype, all you have to do is turn off your video and you
yeah,
use your voice, and you don't have to use your name. Even though I
right.
can see both of your names, but if I can see your names, then I'm not going to tell anybody who your name is. I'm not going to say that. But on the other hand, and that these people that can come on, they can come on anonymous.
Yeah. Okay. I'll pass that on to them then,
Yeah.
because I got a large group of pilots. I'm sure I can find some. But that'd be great.
Well, there you go. I mean, we could do what Newsmax wish they could do. We don't have. Don't forget, we don't have to censor anything here.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do.
No, that's
So
very cool.
until that time, thank you very, very much, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was great. Now, ladies and gentlemen, look, something like this comes along once in a while. This is something you should listen to. You should learn about. This is things that you've heard about. Maybe you're still a kid. Maybe you're not old enough. Maybe you didn't see what I saw and what everyone else saw. But one thing for sure, this is America. This is a free country. This is a place where people should love each other and the rest of the world. And this is all got to do with what we're talking about tonight and what we will talk about in the future. God bless y'all. Bob Charles.